All right. So we're live. Hey, prospectors. This is Rodney Stokes. I have a special guest on. Oh, we have Vicky that's trying to enter. Let me add Vicky in the group. So I have a special guest on. We have Ms. Candice Chapman, and she's amazing. Just a quick backstory. So you guys know that I'm big on Facebook. So basically, a lot of the tools that I create revolve around Facebook prospecting, messenger marketing, all type of stuff. So I like to create things that help people with that process and automate things. So I actually did a little bit of research. Oh, hey, Vicky, let me mute your mic real quick. So I actually did a little bit of research about 2 weeks ago, and I was just looking for, some great courses and tips and training on messenger marketing. And I came across an interview with Candice in another podcast, and it was a lot of value bombs, a lot of gems that she dropped on the call. And so I reached out to her, and to my surprise, same day she was open. She said, "Hey, sure, I'll hop on the call." And I'm trying to get her to kind of come over to the Facebook side because she does things on Instagram. So hopefully we'll get her using Social Prospector, and I think that she can really blow it up because she's already doing the thing on Instagram. So let me do a quick introduction. I don't want to mess it up, so I'm going to read from a paper. All right. So okay. Candice Chapman is a DM sales coach and business strategist that supports entrepreneurs in mastering how to sign up high ticket clients using permission-based selling in the DMs. And for those of you who don't know, that's direct messages or, on Instagram, pretty much. Candice has been featured in CBS, NBC, Yahoo Finance, Fox, Chicago Weekly, etc. That's a lot. That's amazing. For her expertise in marketing and conversational selling. And so just to set the tone, you can share this with your team, whoever's watching this replay or watching it live. It's not going to be any pitching, just like I said, just dropping some value, some quick tips, and open it up for some quick Q&A. All right. So that's pretty much it. So without further ado, thank you for hopping on, Candice.
Yes.
If you could just briefly, just give us your background on how you got started, and you can take it away from there.
Yeah. I love it. Thank you so much. So I have been teaching really any messenger, any place that there's an inbox to have a conversation with your customer, ideal client for about 4.5 years now. I did that extensively in the corporate world and tech, speaking to, C-level executives, to getting individual clients as your own business owner on Instagram or Facebook. As a coach specifically, I've helped anyone from a lawyer to a dieting coach to a dating coach. Really, if you have a service or some sort of ebook product that you are marketing, pushing, conversations work well for that. I'd say my passion really lies in high ticket sales. That's really my business model. And a lot of people want to learn how to do that in the messenger without a crazy funnel, without ads, even without sales calls. I exclusively sell packages $15,000 and upwards without any calls, just by talking to people who find me or I find them sometimes. So I'm really passionate about it. My approach to marketing in the DM or selling in the DMs is really about being creative, being curious, leading with empathy, and asking big and bold questions. I think that's how you make the sale close faster. I always say being willing to go there with your prospects, being willing to ask those tough questions and not hiding away is something I'm really passionate about. So that's a little bit about me. I don't know, Rodney, if you actually already sort of taught permission-based selling, if they're familiar with that.
No, I haven't, and I'm interested in that, especially the fact that you said, your packages are 15,000 and up, because I think that a lot of people have a misconception, and I've had it too. Only these past couple of years I kind of realized that it doesn't really take more effort to sell high ticket than it does to sell something at a lower ticket. You get what I mean? So if you can go into that, because you're schooling me on this, I don't do high tickets. So yeah, break that down.
Right. And I love that we're connected now because you do low ticket, very automated. And I do a lot of high ticket. Most people are selling one-on-one coaching or group programs. And they like to be immersed with their clients. And so they're like, well, how can I sell to people in this way and also still scale it, right? Because we know we're busy people. And so anyway, permission-based marketing is something that an amazing marketer, Seth Godin, or is it Godin? Let me butchering his name. He came up with it. I would highly recommend you read his books. He is an old timer, but still very relevant. And basically, permission-based marketing is about getting consent. And there are levels to consent, right? I'm sure you all are very familiar with the traditional opt-in. That's one form of consent. Someone is putting in their email and giving it to you in exchange. You know, you get to communicate with them. You're going to offer them something, whether it's free or paid. So we're very familiar with, funnel consent, automated consent. But when it comes to conversations, one of the biggest challenges a lot of my clients face is, where is the consent? And how do I determine what I can and can't say? How do I determine when I can pitch? What questions can I ask? And that, I think, takes me to something that I'm very passionate about with DM selling, is mastering emotional intelligence, really understanding your own motives, desires, and behavioral mechanisms, as well as your prospects. Rodney, I know you talk about knowing your target person, your ideal client. If you can know them and feel them, that translates very well into the DMs. So when I teach permission-based selling, it's about, one example of consent is, you guys have probably done this in the DMs. May I ask you a question? Or is it okay if I ask this question? Or you ask the question and say, you say, what's your current goals, if I may ask? That's consent. So that's the easiest baseline, something that I always recommend people start implementing in their conversations, to get a feel for the person and how receptive they are and how open they are to having those types of conversations, right? Because you guys are trying to sign clients, it can get a little personal. You might start wanting to know their at-home situation, what's preventing them from joining right now. So you can start implementing some of that consent by saying those small little phrases. It takes you a long way. When we start thinking about less obvious consent, it's about body language. Body language. You can't see that in the DMs. I wish. It's about tone. So I recommend, if you guys are not implementing voice memos in Facebook, Instagram, wherever, utilize the voice memos. Because what is written, you can't pick up per se how someone feels. You can hear in someone's voice if they're hesitant. Unless someone says, and they type it out, I'm hesitant, you're not sure. So most of the things that I'm teaching in terms of DM sales revolve around voice memos. I recommend 90% of the time, if you can, use voice memos. But like in your intro messages when you're first starting, or if you're sending a specific link, you can write that out. But when you're trying to close a sale and you're asking personal questions around their finances, anything around like their time, what's holding them back, when they start sharing more about their challenges, getting the result that you can help them with, come back with some voice memo. That will help you determine, how does this person feel? What can I hear in their voice? That's powerful. How to start voice memos. Do you mean from the logistical, technical standpoint, or like in terms of the sell? It's a great question.
Yeah, that is.
Feel free to keep dropping those questions as I go.
And while he explains that, I want to add something on what you said.
Yeah,
I learned years ago, the most powerful, I guess you would say, word or name that you can say is that person's name. Like, I think they said the most powerful word is your prospect's name, right? It kind of sets like a personal tone. And then on top of that, doing a voicemail where they actually hear your voice, they see that you're a real person because they're checking out your profile. That has to add some type of elements of trust as well. So I think that's big.
Absolutely. Use their name. This is why I'm not a big fan of too many in when you're having a conversation, too generic. Like, use those details that you know. And yes, Monty, I didn't mean to say body signals. I meant to say tone. So hearing it, right? Their words, are they very soft spoken? Now, these aren't things you're going to necessarily call out and say, hey, you're soft spoken. But as you start to get more experience having conversations, you can start to read those signals. Oh, if I asked her about her finances and she sounds very hesitant, maybe there's something there that can give you an indication I should lead with more empathy. I want to show that I'm understanding and not pushy, but still want to help her. What would I say then? Versus if they just wrote it out, you might not be able to understand how they feel and what they're thinking by hearing. So that's why I recommend voice memos to collect some of that data. Now, you guys are all, most people who are in sales or decide to start their business are already emotionally intelligent, more than average. So it may sound like, man, this is hard to grasp right now, but just test this right when you get off and you're talking to someone and start implementing voice memo. And you don't have to ask them to use voice memo. It's your voice. Whether or not they want to or not is on them. You don't have to say, hey, use voice memo back. But when you start, typically they will. Now, if you do have someone who isn't using any, you can be bold. I'm very big on being bold. I say go bold or go home, really. And you can say, I'd love to hear your voice. Get on voice memo. Let's start the party. I'm also about understanding, or you all should understand the way you like to sell. So I'm very friendly. I'm very bold. I like jokes. I like gifts. So I throw in those emojis and those memes. People know me as a persona to be very direct. If you're not necessarily like that all the time, take that into consideration when you're selling.
That's
You're
a
going to teach me how to do the voice memos. Yeah, definitely.
yeah, that's a great point. And let me go back to Attila's question. So should we ask them before? You answered that, matter of fact. Should we ask them before? And I think like Candice said, you start off, you do the voice
You
message
just started.
initially. Yeah, if they decide to reply back, doing voice message, that's great as well. But you just started off and set the tone and see how they kind of respond. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and also Candice, and the reason why I liked and I wanted to get you on this call so much was because you are more bold and upfront with your approach. And I tend to, and this is what I do, so I teach what I do. I tend to be more passive because I know exactly, yeah, how I targeted that person. Because as we teach social prospector pro users, we're going after people in our, targeted Facebook groups, different posts or whatever that we know contain that perfect prospect. And then as you're doing that routine every day, people are going to be, blowing your inbox up. Like, hey, how do I know you? Or hey, how are you? How was your weekend? And I tell people, hey, just be human and be helpful. And what I mean by that is don't be gimmicky, don't just go into pitch mode because you're excited that you got somebody to message you. And then also
Right.
another thing is, and then I'll let you take it back over. Another thing that I also teach and what I like to do is I like to answer questions in advance. So if I know who I targeted, yeah, like for example, I just got into this Bitcoin deal, Bitcoin mining deal, right? And so I already went into market research mode. I made a whole list of Facebook groups, different influencers who have my crowd that I can target. But then at the same time, it's kind of hard to explain the process without giving away exactly what I'm gonna do. But basically, when I go after folks, I want to make sure that I set up my profile to where I already answered those questions that I know that they have. Like, for example, I'm going after people who own Bitcoin machines, mining machines, right? And their main issue that I already know they have is the electric bill. Because if you're trying to do all of this yourself, your bill going to be sky high. You got to maintain everything.
I wish you could see mine right here.
Oh, you have one?
Yeah,
Oh,
Ethereum.
wow. Oh, okay. But we're going to talk about that after this call. But so I know exactly the different issues that my crowd suffers from. And then if I'm in advance, even before I meet you, I put answers to that. Like, hey, how would you like to save on your electric bill? How
I
would you
love
like to
it.
be hands off? And I just sprinkle all of that different valuable content on my post. By the time someone sees a friend request from Rodney Stokes and they go and take a look, they're like, oh, I like this guy. Like he's right on the money. Like he read my thoughts. So that's kind of the approach that I like. And that kind of makes the whole conversation go more smooth. So interested in getting your take on that.
I absolutely agree with that. And that's also something I'm teaching outside the DM. So again, I teach ZMs, but we're also teaching content as a whole and sales as a whole, because the content is what gets conversations, right? Without that, it's kind of like, what are you paying for ads, right? And so I love basically answering their questions before. I kind of also say, if need be, shifting their perspective, like you said, answering questions, also potentially overcoming objections. Let's say someone is constantly talking about time. What is my average? It's about a 98%. Like it's a fast close rate, and I close My lifetime close rate as a whole, 72% of my sales close in 1 and 4 days. Other than that, they take a week or so or longer.
That's
There's
great.
always some nurturing, but I'm fast. That's also because I'm very bold and direct. That's the key to that. But as I was saying, the other thing I do in my content and teach people is to overcome objections as well. So if you've worked with a few people or even for your paid clients, that they always have reasons that could potentially hinder them from investing, or what stopped them before getting your help or before hitting the gym. How can you write that in pieces of content? Like you said, Rodney, then they come to your page and without realizing it, you're already helping them sell. Or they're like, wow, I can get behind this person and their values. I really, really love that. That also helps close the sale faster, because then in the DMs, there's not much rigmarole, right? There's not that many questions. It's like, how can I sign up? I've already binged your content. The other thing, I will answer questions in a minute, Robert. I saw your great questions there. Is I pretty much teach live video selling. And that can be done on Facebook too. I used to be on Facebook, just not as much anymore, but that also goes very, very well with high ticket sales specifically and DMs, because live is the highest form of attention that your audience can give you, right? A reel, that's short. A post, that's a like, that's a heart, that's a save. But a live, they're there with you. And long story short, basically, as you continue to do those lives and you're selling and giving that good value, not over-educating. I'm not a believer of over-educating. I'm a believer of, here's your problem, here's the solution, bye. But I will say, you start to see those same faces again. You also have created a pool of leads. But again, it doesn't sound like you guys need necessarily leads. You need to close them because you've got the tool. So I want to answer some of these questions before I get so passionate about this. I could just go on forever and ever. Yeah. Is there a particular set of questions to use when prospecting? I would say yes. 2 different sort of avenues. Are you going to them or are they coming to you? When I say you going to them, meaning even you connecting first and saying hi, it doesn't sound like you guys are doing much of that, right? Most people, they're coming to you. So when people are coming to you, that's amazing, because that's already, you knocked off a level of permission. They're in your DMs, they're in your territory. So that is definitely my advice. The more direct, bold questions, right? You're talking, you're connecting, you say, because you said, one of the things you often say is, thanks for connecting, I look forward to our friendship. That's sending them away unless you continue that on. So I recommend saying, like, thanks for connecting, and I do look forward to our friendship. Ask the question. What made you connect? What brought you here specifically? Are you in need of X? One could assume, if these are, you're prospecting them, you found them. So immediately start asking questions so you keep them in the message, not like, see you later and come back when you're ready, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like creating an open loop, right?
Basically.
You continue on that. And I wanted to add something, not to cut you off.
Go for it.
I wanted to add something where Robert says, yes, they're coming to us, but then also you can actually go to them too, because, when you're using social prospecting, when these people approve your friend request, there's going to be a percentage that reach out after they approve, but then there's also a percentage that just click accept, and they're not going to hit you up or whatever the case is. But the fact that they accepted that can be an opening for you to say, hey, thanks for accepting my friend request, or hey, glad to connect. How are you? And you can kind of break the ice that way as well. So you can go after them also.
Right. So I like to, in my examples, I'll give like the worst case scenario, meaning like the dry responses. Let's say someone says, oh, I connected because your page looks cool. You're like, that doesn't give me much. Next question. What about my page is specifically interesting? Tell me a little bit more. I also like to do something called spoon feeding, which moves the conversation faster, meaning don't just ask questions and like wait for the answers. Give them some options, throw it at them, right? So it's like, are you interested in grooming your dog? Just making up whatever, right? Are you interested in, give them the options of all of the things that you do, not necessarily just your offers, but the ways that you help your clients, right? So for example, one of the messages that I will send to people who find me first or come in my DMs, I actually have a list of 4 areas that I mainly focus on: live video selling, emotional intelligence, DM sales with or without sales calls, and I forgot the other one, but whatever. Which 3 of those are you most interested in? then it's almost, this sounds a little robotic in practice, but we're also using voice memo. We're making it fun. They usually tell me exactly which one. Then I start asking more questions. People like to be heard, right? They do. So I like to get people talking, like, what brought you here? When people spam you a messenger, how do you turn it into a sell for yourself since they're doing, oh, I love that. Ooh, so I call it out. Hey, I really appreciate you reaching out. I again lead with empathy. This takes balls to say this, or takes guts. I love that. Maybe I can relate. I used to work for Beachbody, a lot of MLMs, but I want to be candid and open as I'm a DM sales coach and tell you that there's actually a better way to market than this. That's the bold way, but you can be a little, but I call it out
Yeah.
because that's also another way to get clients.
Yeah.
And they're like, what? But you say it nicely and they let you hear your voice. I say in voice memo is the best way. 99% of people take it well. Some people say, thanks, I know what I'm doing. And then I'm just like, no, you don't. But I call it out. And I say, I'd be willing to share that with you if you're open. Permission. What are your thoughts? Most people say yes.
Yeah, I love that. And that's reverse pitching. And who asked that, Monty?
Yeah,
That
I
was a
love
great
that.
question. I actually
Love
have
a
that on my
reverse
list.
pitch.
Yeah. So, and that's another thing that you want to consider. Like when I first came online, they called it a funded proposal. So basically, as you're pitching people, you have these alternative, you have these alternative resources that you can give them, whether they choose to take you up on the main offer or not. So a thing that I like, obviously, I like to help people prospect and get traffic, whether that's email traffic or on Facebook. So if someone tries to pitch me in my inbox, I'll say, hey, Candice, obviously you need help getting leads or getting that offer in front of people who actually care.
I love it.
You know what I mean? And then I'll just give them a link. But what I'm going to do now
you can
that you
send a
said
link.
that,
That's right.
yeah. But now I'm going to do a voicemail message with it so they can hear my voice and I'll be empathetic and all of that. But yeah, I love that.
I'm also big on testing different strategies because there's so many people to message or talk to. So that's one bold way. Send them a link back. Sounds like you need help on this thing. Another way is I diagnose, or I again asking the questions, letting them know there's a better way, asking them if they want to know that way. Before I start telling them all the things, I typically ask questions. So for example, like, I don't want to overstep, but is this something that you learned from a coach? Do you currently have one? What does that look like? Now I'm gonna kill two birds in one stone. Now I know you probably don't have a coach. Where did you get that from? It's horrible. So I start asking questions where I'm really qualifying in a way without them knowing it. And I'm not trying to be manipulative. That's just the way it is because it's the truth. You need help, right? And then I asked them too, how is this message working for you? How many people is it closing? Let's get some data. So I'm big on when you ask pointed questions, you can leverage that to help close the sale. Because if I were to just say, you need help, buy my ebook, that might work for some, but like they're still thinking in their head, well, it works. It worked for 5, but what if I could show you how to make it work for 500? So I'm getting some data by being like, is this working for you often? Like, tell me a little bit more. What does that look like? Are you selling your products? What is that? That's the conversation. There was a question. How do you talk to their pain and solve their pain problem, the person's problem, right? This is where we get intimate. I'm very big on like, nothing is left untouched if need be. That doesn't mean everything comes up in one specific conversation. But again, that means I'm asking very bold conversations. If I'm working with or talking to someone in the DMs who has a lot of issues, you better believe I'm going to know exactly what's going on from their home life to their financial situation. Partially because, my programs are long-term, high ticket, requires a lot of qualifying, right? So one of the best things is, these are some sort of ways that I start to learn that by being like, tell me a little bit more about what you're going through. Like spoon feed them. What does that look like? Because I know you said you're interested in getting help in X a bit. Are you currently doing that on your own? Are you receiving some outside support? Like paint a picture of what that looks like. You want to get them talking. They should be either sending you paragraphs, not like necessarily that long, but open or voice memos back. I always say too, if you're not quite sure or you're assuming you know the answer to something, a great way to get more information from your prospects is to say, tell me a little bit more about that. Like, imagine if you just throw that in when someone answers your question and it's very short. Tell me a little bit more about that. You can say, that helps me to understand your situation a little bit better to see if my solution fits yours. Another way is to call out their problems. So what would be helpful, and I should have asked this at the beginning, if you guys want to just put in the chat what you guys are selling or how you help people, I can give some more pointed examples. But
can I add something real quick?
Go for it.
So I love what you said as far as in their mind, they're like, hey, well, what I have is working. Like, no, thank you. So when you're approaching somebody, especially nowadays online, people are already primed to think, what's up with this guy? Or what's up with this lady? She's going to try to sell me. So they're on guard. So a thing I like to teach people and what I do every day is I like to compliment, not compete. So mentally, when you tell somebody, oh, you made a bad choice, or why did you join that company? Or, this company is way better than that. Like, here's the facts and the figures and the logical stuff. What you did was you just made that person put up a steel gate. So like they're not listening to you no more. I used to do door-to-doors back in the day when I was a teenager. That's how I started off, right? And I got so many. I just wrote an email about that this morning. I had guns pulled on me. I had so many doors slammed in my face. Like it was wild, but you get used to rejection and it doesn't hurt after a while. They had a saying called go for no. Let's see how many no's you can get until you get a yes. And then every week, let's shrink that down. So your yes ratio overpowers the no, right? So it's kind of like retraining the way a person's psyche is. And so I say that because when you tell somebody, oh, that program sucks, this is better, or why did you join that type of thing, you killed your sale on the spot. So what you want to do is you want to compliment. So one of my favorite lines to say is, and a lot of times when I want to wrap up the conversation is, well, look, I appreciate you connecting. If there's any way I can compliment what you already have going on, let me know. And then that kind of opens it up for them to say, well, what are you into? Because I'll go a whole conversation without saying what I sell or what I do or whatever. And then finally the person feels comfortable with me and they say, well, look, tell me about you. I've been talking this whole time. And then I say, well, look, I just help people put their offer in front of the right people. I help people get leads on Facebook, and I also provide traffic through an email service. And then at that point, they saw that you weren't trying to shove their stuff down their throat. You know what I mean? So now they're more open. So that's just a quick tip as well.
I love that. And I think that is, y'all absolutely follow that advice, especially, again, you shouldn't, I rarely am telling like, that's bad. Why'd you do that? Unless they're, being bold in my DMs and pitching me all right away. But I also like to help them see how there's a better way or another perspective. Also think you have to keep in mind where you're at in your with your leads. Are people coming to you kind of ready to buy? Most people are for me. So that's also why it's so easy to be like straight on the sale and not much small talk and stuff like that. But there's nothing wrong with needing to be a little bit more passive, get to know someone, have a conversation and nurture a bit. And maybe you don't pitch right away, right? So like there's beauty in different angles for this. So I rarely have someone come to me and be like, oh, I know what you're doing. Because they're coming to me, most people. The only people I reach out to is new followers and people watching my stories. And I'll tell you the two exact things I do. New followers all get one same message, basically a list of things that I can help them with, which one they're most interested in learning and hearing about. Then we put them it's not a real funnel, but we track those people and those data points of what they're saying they're interested in. That helps with some content. And then we send them specific pieces through Instagram that they can be watching to further nurture them. And I come back in a day or so and ask them about that content, what was helpful. That's a great way to close clients. The other way is people watching my stories, people that I've never talked to that are continuously watching. I'm bold. It's my personality. So I go and say like, hey, I see you watching my stories recently, and I know we have not connected yet. Don't be a lurker. Let's talk. How are you? And if it's something like very specific that day, I asked them like what their thoughts were on that story. Now we're starting a conversation. That's the only 2 times I message people. Other than that, people come to me and find me. But that's because, I've got a lot of pieces of content everywhere. And then in terms of like, I've never had anyone, most people do know these basic techniques, not most people. A lot of people who are in sales do teach some of these practices. I think where I'm different is I'm bolder. My close rate is really fast for the prices that my programs are. And I don't believe in over nurturing or really any nurturing and creating a bunch of educational content. So that's why people come to me, and I'm specifically different. I don't believe you have to really educate much. You just have to shift their perspective in line with what you're offering. And that's not like 5 tips today. That's like, let me show you this way and bring you in. Yeah, this is great.
Yeah, so it sounds like I won't say the majority, but a lot of your prospects are finding you through what, like organic traffic searches and stuff like that, different
Yeah,
content
so
out there.
I'm claiming, don't anyone go take my niche. No, I'm joking. I love competition. There aren't many people claiming DM sales on Instagram. I'm dominating the hashtag. I've done over 40 plus podcasts last year alone. So a lot of podcasting articles that I've written. I'm pretty searchable on LinkedIn as well. That one interview on YouTube has brought me so many clients. So I love it. And that only has 2,000 views.
Yeah.
I have my own podcast, and that's it. No ads, none of that. Hashtags and explore page, and referrals.
Well, one of the reasons that's amazing, and I tell people all the time, when you're doing organic stuff, search traffic is like the best traffic possible, because a person like me that's going to go to YouTube and type in how to close in the DM and lands on that video and watches the entire interview and then hits you up, that person's already primed. That's a quality prospect, because not only did they search for it, but then they consumed the content and then they reached out. And so to kind of put it in a perspective for a social prospector user, is kind of the same as you going to these targeted groups and these targeted posts and pieces of content where these people are being primed. You know what I mean? So if there's a Facebook group about closing in a DM, and even if there's only 2,000 people in that group, these people are high quality, especially if it's a private group and they had to answer a little questionnaire to get in there. So I say that to kind of like compare, right? Because even though a lot of your stuff is coming organically, we're doing stuff organically too, but we're going after the people that consume that content, right?
And that's why I love this tool. I can't wait to get my hands on it, because then I'm gonna it's over. It's over.
It's a wrap at that point.
It's a wrap after that.
Yeah.
And see, I don't mind that type of putting in the work, because it's highly, curated in that way, and you know what you're doing. I love that. I absolutely love that. I know. I'm so excited that you found me, Rodney, because this is amazing.
For sure. And look, and I appreciate you hopping on. I'm not going to hold you too much longer. I want to ask you just a few more questions, all right?
Sure.
So can you briefly touch on traffic temperatures, like warm lead versus cold lead, hot lead? Yeah.
Yes, I appreciate you all too. And I love a small, intimate group. Well, that's a big question. What specifically do you want to know about that? Like how I determine which one is like.
Let me do that based on a question somebody asked earlier. So a person who reached out to me versus me reaching out to a person. So I guess, like, how would you, because like, a warm lead is basically a person that's aware that they have the problem. A hot lead is a person that, they know they have the problem. They know you have the solution. A cold lead is just a person you just flat out prospecting. You get what I mean? So how would you compare the difference between a person that DMs you first or a person that you DM, even though I know that you don't really DM like that?
Every now and then I'm like, oh, you need help. Let me just go message you and be bold.
Yeah.
But, again, I don't have to at this point anymore. But I think your categorization is pretty accurate. One thing I will say is there's some nuances. And that's why sales is like a skill you master with time and experience, right? The more you can immerse yourself in conversations, you can determine what that looks like. Because I have people who message me all the time, and they could be like, I need help, Candice, and they're not ready to buy. I'm not calling that a warm lead then, even though the initial message might be like, please help me. So I really start to define how warm a lead is after somewhat of the conversation. So overall, are they unaware of their problem? They're not likely to buy right away then, because they're still, if you guys know the buyer personas, the buyer journey, right? You can Google the buyer's journey and see the different stages. That's a pretty accurate model to implement in any sales conversation, DMs or sales calls. If someone is like fighting you, or they don't seem very urgent, when I say fighting you, let me back up, like trying to argue with you over your expertise or what they think is right versus what you're saying, they're not aware at least enough of your solution or your perspective, and there's some friction, they're not likely to buy right now, right? If someone's not even talking about getting help yet, but they know their pain points, I'm not really calling that might be a little warm, but not warm enough that I would, move forward. Someone who's like, hey, yeah, I've been struggling. I'm tired of struggling. And they're at least consider they want to get help and they're considering you and maybe 5 other people. That to me is warm going into a hot lead. Then it's up to you to show your value and talk about it and discuss if you're the best step for them. But I don't know truly until I have a conversation. And I will flat out say, if someone comes to me being like, hey, or the first part of the conversation, I get a feel that they're interested in getting help. I will say, so where are you in terms of timeline and wanting to invest? 1 month, two, next week? Help me understand that. Right away, I need to know, are you serious or not? Now, most people that are DMing me are asking specific questions that tell me, oh, they're ready to buy my solution. Like, hey, Candice, I was looking on your website and the link, what's the difference between 6 month and a year coaching? You're considering mine. That's hot, right? So if they come in with pointed questions about your offer, that's not just like, I'm struggling with losing weight. Hey, I'm looking at your solution and it says 30, 60, 90 days. Oh, they're hot, close them. If they're like, I don't know where to start, I just started experiencing my problem, probably warm. And then of course, cold is like, again, they're not in your ecosystem of Facebook. They're not following you, not following them maybe, or again, you're just prospecting them. They don't really know you. That's cold in terms of the connection, but not necessarily cold, or not necessarily that they don't need help yet. You just have to identify, do they need help? Where are you in terms of being able to invest? Is that how I should work? I love that. I ask that all the time. Yeah, where are you in terms, give me a feel for that. My biggest key to DMs is don't sound robotic and too calculated, which is why I recommend voice memo. Because you can unsend it, at least on Instagram. I don't know about Facebook, but you're not likely to keep unsending messages. So you're just going to sound natural. I think when you type, you take too long, you try to make it sound perfect, you formulate it. It should sound like you're talking. So I say things backwards sometimes, and I'm like, whatever. You don't need to be perfect to make money.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of like banner blindness too, or like people who do Facebook ads. I suck at Facebook ads, but eventually people become blind to the same stuff. Oh, that's just another ad, even on YouTube. So
Yeah.
if a person is just having a text conversation all day, every day, but you're the first person that day to switch it up and do a message,
Yep.
it's like, oh, okay, now you got their attention, and that's
Yep.
marketing one-on-ones, get attention.
And you know what? A lot of
Right.
people tell me, wow, I'm so surprised you messaged me from watching your stories. No one does that. I'm like, yeah,
Right.
of course.
And
Do
it's such
something
a small
different.
thing. Yeah. And nobody does it, like you said.
Yep.
How
I love
important
it.
to you is profile research? So I think you briefly said, and I'll tell just a quick story. I did a training in the group about 2 weeks ago where I had a guy, fishing around, asking some questions. And I said, okay, well, how can I kind of bridge the gap, find something in common? I went to his profile. I clicked on the link in his description. It took me to a sales page. I opted in, and I saw in the sales video, my buddy Ontarian Hawkins was in the video. And that's a friend of mine who I was actually doing a training call that same afternoon with. And so I reached back out to him and said, hey, man, that's a great offer. By the way, I see my guy Ontarians, and I'm actually doing a training later. I think it'll be beneficial to you. I'll drop a link if you want. He said, oh, that's great. Drop a link. That same night he signed up. And then he asked
I
me,
love
I
it.
think the next day, for an affiliate link so he can refer people. So a lot of times, if you struggle to kind of find something in common, or, because the thing that I say is trust before transaction. I don't want to talk about any business or anything unless I feel we're vibing and you trust. Of course, you're not going to trust me off the bat because I don't know you. You don't know me. But, the things is going smooth like a regular conversation should. And so sometimes you need a little help with that to see what you have in common. And so by going to the profile, you can kind of find little things to talk about, right?
I absolutely agree. And that's also one of the reasons I love a high ticket business model, because it only takes a few to hit my sales goals. And I can also put in that time to get to know that person. Time is relative when I'm closing clients fast, but I'm not doing that for 1,000 leads a day. 5, sure. I can go to your profile. I can opt in. I do think it's important. Absolutely. Especially if someone has a lot of pains and they're obvious that those are obvious hesitations. Where can you connect with them? And so anyone, let's say people watching my story, since I'll reach out there, I'm absolutely going over their profile too. Absolutely. It's just good to know like what they actually do. You can connect on where you live. Maybe they went to the same school, they have kids, they have the same dogs. I don't believe in small talk, but those little things do go a long way to build trust. The other way I love to build trust and really quickly is don't be afraid to put yourself out there, your own vulnerabilities. So one thing I do a lot in the DMs, which helps to move the sale faster, is I share my horror stories if they're appropriate. One of the biggest challenges is a lot of people have been burned by coaches promising 100K months yesterday, all of these different things. And so when they come to me, they want that deep, intimate support, but they are like, do you have a guarantee of signing clients? Like, what does that look like? They're burned. So I share my similar stories of like, I know what it's like to spend a lot of money and not get a return, or get in a program in XYZ. I recommend, if you have stories that resonate, share it, because it shows, oh, she's been there too. She's been there too. They know what it's like. They're not likely to do the same thing to me, or they know what it's like to feel that pain or have that desire, right? Let's flip it real quick on a desire. They're desperately wanting to take that dream vacation. It's been 7 years since a vacation. Talk about when you were in the grind trying to make it work and you were sacrificing, and you know what it's like to do the same thing. And that's why you can help them. There you go. So I share those stories all the time.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I got one last question I want to ask you. I don't want to hold you too long. As far as your follow-up routine, because
good one.
yeah, because I can tell you have something, way more detailed than me. I'll talk to somebody, and then I'll get a feel for them, and then I'll put it in Google Calendar, follow up with this person in 3 days, follow up tomorrow. And that's literally it. I wake up, I look at my calendar, oh, okay, let me follow up. But I don't have like a CRM and this whole mapped out thing. You know what I mean?
So again, what I teach versus what I do, I'm also in a different place. I don't track anything. Everything is manageable, but I eat, live, and breathe conversations. That's why. Facebook can get a little hectic when I was using it again.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I do recommend write something down, especially if you are prone to forget. I don't forget conversations because that's where my money is, right? But if you're like, oh, I might, that's a really great practice. And I used to do a little bit of that. Put it on your calendar, put in your notes, a reminder, something. You don't have to have crazy CRMs. I do recommend Pipe Drive if you guys want something that is a little bit more, efficient, effective, like a platform. You can even use like Asana or Airtable if you just make your form right, and those have reminders and things of that nature. But I do recommend following up when someone has shown interest, but they need to talk to a spouse or something, they'll get back to you, they're moving, follow up as soon as possible. So 1 to 3 days is usually a good spot for most things. If you didn't get to the pitch yet or the offer, this is where emotional intelligence and discernment comes in. Like, use your judgment. Don't let fear hold you back from following up and what ifs and over assuming things, but it might need 3-4 more days. I also like to ask people, when is it okay to follow up with you? I was thinking 2 days, ? They say, oh, I'm actually getting married tomorrow and then going to Bali for 4 weeks. Follow up with me, and there you go. Now you know. So I would recommend you ask that, and just spoon feed them too or tell them you're going to follow up in 3 days. I do both. Okay, great. I can't wait to connect with you. I'm going to follow up with you next Tuesday. Sound good? Perfect.
Yeah, I love that. Plain and simple. Keep it simple.
Yeah, keep it simple. Direct is easy.
Absolutely. And then if that person put it out there, then it's like, okay, now I got to live up to what I said. So, you know what I mean? I got to be serious and be there when she follows up.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I just wanted to open. So we got Robert, we got Attila, we got Vicky and Monty. If anybody wants to unmute your mic, if you had any questions, let's take 5, maybe 10 minutes at the most. Just answer those questions before we wrap up the call. Robert, I know you probably have some questions or some comments.
Yeah,
let's see.
Hey, I didn't particularly have any questions. I just wanted to thank you for your time, Candice. I always appreciate hearing from another person in the industry. I have a firm belief that we can all learn something from each other, so I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Robert. I agree. I love it.
Absolutely.
It's so exciting.
And I want to also throw in, while anybody else wants to unmute their mic, I want to throw in one last tip. So we got the reverse pitch. That works amazing. So ask yourself, how can I, even if you're an affiliate to something, right? So even if your product is not always want to complement each of those prospects you're going after, you can become an affiliate to a traffic service or to Social Prospecting Pro and say, well, obviously your aim is off. You know, you're going after somebody who never asked, you know, who didn't solicit your service. Social Prospector Pro will help you pinpoint, you know, prospects that actually care about what you have, and you could drop your link. So that's a cool thing to add to your arsenal. Reverse pitch, compliment, don't compete, never insult the person. Yeah, try not to offend them. And then also forecasting. That's or future pacing. That's the thing that works great for me. A lot of times, you know, somebody asks me questions and I'll say, well, first, let me ask you, if you don't mind, what business opportunity are you in? And what struggles are you having? So they'll say, well, I'm in Melaleuca or something like that. And I'll say, oh, wow. And then I'll go ahead and I'll grab like, you know, 2, 3, 4 Facebook groups for health and wellness, fitness, you know, people who like to take care of their body, because that's primarily what Melaleuca products are for, all organic stuff and all of that, right? And then I'll tell them, look, just with these 2, 3 groups alone, can you imagine if all 5,000 spots on your Facebook friends list were filled up with people from these types of groups? Every time you post is being seen by the perfect people. It will be hard not to make sales. And then once you put that, you plant that seed into that prospect's mind where they can see themselves having success by just doing those few steps. It's at that point, it's an easy sell, because it's like Inception. They've already convinced themselves. You get what I'm saying? So if you can future pace whatever your product is, plant that seed and figure out a way to allow that person to see themselves as if that already happened, and say, well, look, I can get you there. All you got to do is follow this 4-step process. And so that's a powerful way to close as well. I can help do a training as well one day. Okay, Robert, I appreciate that. Okay, any other questions? Vicky, Monty, Attila? And Candice, I appreciate you. I know with short notice, I know you got to get back to work. I do too. But thank you. And yeah, and hopefully we got some good feedback. And just to be transparent and let you guys know, we wanted to see what type of questions popped up, because, you know, potentially we might be able to create a course, because I think it's powerful to have kind of the best of both worlds, where both of us are organic, but she's high ticket. She applies a little more pressure than I do or I teach, but then I'm more passive, so we can kind of cover all ground. So
for both people, yep.
Exactly. So it might be something in the works. Again, thank everybody for getting on. Thank you, Candice. I learned some new approaches. Okay, great.
Love it. Awesome. Well, thank you, Rodney.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's my pleasure. And let's get you started using Social Prospector Pro.
Yes,
let's
thank
end it
you.
with that. All right. Well, thanks everybody. We're going to wrap it up. Any questions? Okay, that's it. All right. Everybody enjoy your day. Have a good one. Bye.